Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025, and today we're talking about ginger, a lot about ginger, and also let's discuss some easy and fun ways to use basically anything that comes out of the garden. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday. Every Tuesday this year will be brought to you by our friends at Tilth Soil. If you're looking for compost or propagation mix, check out tilthsoil.com. Link will be in the show notes. I hope everyone had a nice, fun, extended weekend. We obviously took Labor Day off, but welcome to September. We are officially here, y'all. We made it. The month that unofficially kicks off fall, the month I started this podcast. I have a lot of friends and family born in this month, so lots of celebrating that happens in September. But I also know it's the month that likes to pretend it's something that it's not, and we could easily get back into the 100-degree Fahrenheit range, and September wouldn't even bat an eye. I had my typical soccer coaching and hanging out with the family type of weekend. Spent a couple hours at the Kentucky River as well yesterday with some friends, which is fun. The river is low and the pastures are brown here, and that's basically all farmers are talking about at the moment. Since July 20th, we've had roughly 0.38 inches of rain on our farm, which is nothing in Kentucky, where we have all this vegetation to maintain. But there are a couple chances of rain this week, so I look forward to those skipping right over us so I can fill my swear jar a little bit more. It's looking kind of low, you know. Oh, hey, don't forget, this month we are asking musicians to cover the theme song and send in MP3 or video over to Farmer Mike at no-tillgrowers.com, and we'll play it on the show. We've got a few already, and I'm very excited about that. That will start tomorrow. Make sure to include your name or band name and or whatever links you want us to use. Thank you. I'm very excited about that. You'll hear the first one tomorrow. Okay, so today I thought I would dedicate it to ginger growing. In fact, I didn't so much decide this as our Patreon member Amy Blankenship did. Amy will be our Patreon question in the second segment, but in this first part of their question, they wrote, quote, "Hi Jesse, I really enjoy the way you handle the trolls in a tactful but firm way." Thanks, Amy. Now, on to the questions. Somewhere around February, you mentioned starting your ginger and said you would add more later. Is it time yet? You said the word ginger tonight and I perked up, but alas, no. End quote. All right, so indeed, I know I did a short segment on ginger growing in the field, like was it possible, way back in 2024, which I'll link that episode in the show notes, but I don't think I have talked much about ginger production, at least not in too much depth beyond that. So let's take today to talk ginger in its entirety from start to finish. In the Northern Hemisphere, of course, the window is gone for most of us to grow ginger this year because it takes the better part of 120 days for baby ginger, but you Southern Hemi folks can use this real soon, if not like right now, and then we can get back to ginger growing up here in the late winter / early spring of 2026. Now, in the first segment, we'll talk about starting ginger from roots, the rhizomes, which I'll mostly just call roots, but whatever. And then in the third segment, we'll talk about planting, harvesting, and that sort of stuff. I've tried several different things with ginger production, but what I've arrived at is essentially that I buy my ginger seed, quote unquote, again, the rhizome, the brown thing that you grow the ginger from. And that seed is being just the organic ginger rhizome. The conventional stuff won't generally work because it has been irradiated, meaning it will no longer sprout. Anyway, we buy our certified organic ginger seed, the rhizomes that we're going to sprout it from the grocery store. Yes, you can buy organic ginger root from a ginger supplier, but the price difference is significant. And although you may be risking some disease issues doing it the way that we do it, buying it from the grocery store, I also know plenty of people who buy the expensive seed and also get disease issues, despite its disease-free designation. So for us, we found we may as well just save the money on the seed. But of course, do whatever makes sense for you. I have not done a side-by-side comparison in terms of yield, the store-bought stuff versus the roots that you buy from a root supplier, though my assumption would be that the expensive, large ginger root seed probably will produce a little bit better. Ours does fine, but if it were a bigger part of our profit plan, then we might make the effort to really see how many more ounces of ginger we can get out of the expensive seed versus the upfront cost of it. In general, larger seed root tends to yield higher according to the study. So seed quality or not, go for the big ones. In tropical or some subtropical climates, unsprouted ginger seed roots can be placed directly into the soil to sprout them. For us here in Kentucky Zone 6B, we are just a little bit too cold for that to make any sort of sense, at least in the spring, and definitely not in the field, but really anywhere, because ginger can take several weeks to germinate. Instead, what we do is we break the roots up slightly into slightly smaller pieces with at least a few growth points, like the little pointy part of the ginger root. Place those roots with a couple inches between each root piece in the tray. And we put a little bit of peat moss on the bottom of the tray, and then we put the ginger root, and then we cover that with peat moss or soil mix or coconut coir or whatever. There is, in fact, a good guide from Illinois State University that I will link in the show notes for some of the more details on how to do this. The roots need decent moisture and humidity, but the top of the medium, whatever it is, should also be allowed to dry out for a day after watering it. So water heavy and then let it just kind of dry out for a day or two, and then you can water it again. If it all stays too wet, the roots can rot, so you don't want it to just stay, soaking wet the whole time. The optimum temperature for sprouting ginger is 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like 27 degrees Celsius, so above room temperature, essentially. A heat pad and humidity dome are ideal, but y'all, I've germinated ginger and turmeric, which has very similar production, in trays in an off-grid cabin before. So don't feel like you have to overthink this. It has to be warm, it has to be humid, those sorts of things. They cannot get cold and definitely not freeze or they will rot. Preferably the roots would have some sort of breathable humidity dome over them. Even an additional tray works, like just put a tray right over top until they sprout. Now, I stick the trays in the same closet as I do our hot water heater. I've talked about this when I talked about grafting the tomatoes, but I use that same space because it's nice and warm. Then when I see a sprout, I put it under a grow light by a window. Then ideally you get a little bit of growth before it's spring and it's time to plant. We will discuss spacing and production and all that good stuff in the third segment, but we are typically starting our ginger about 6 weeks before we want to plant it, give or take. And we like to get it roughly 6 inches tall before we plant it if possible, again, give or take. In the tunnel, we plant in roughly like mid-April, so we'd be starting in like February. In the field, we plant in mid-May after our last chance of frost, and preferably after a tarping. Or after we have warmed that area using row cover or something. And for those, we'd start usually in like mid-March. In other words, you don't want it to go into cold soil if you can, with the tarping or with the row cover or whatever. You want to just warm that soil slightly. For us, for right now, we are just growing ginger in the corners of our greenhouse because it's an easier use of that space and we don't need a ton of ginger at the moment. But next year, we will have to rotate it out of that space and probably into its own bed in the tunnel just for simple disease protection. We don't want to place it in the same place and risk getting diseases. Anyway, again, more on all that in the last segment. First, we're going to get a quick word from our dear friends at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit rimmel.com today to get growing. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from, as I said, Patreon member Amy Blankenship, who got us started on the ginger, but we're going to take a second to answer the second part of Amy's question, which was, quote, speaking of yummy things, my favorite thing about gardening is your focus shifts from perfect recipes to using what you have. I've discovered some great combinations this way, like figs are great in oatmeal, and last year's freezer burned butternut squash actually improves the spaghetti sauce you're making from all the fresh garlic, herbs, and tomatoes you're getting right now. Oh, I love that combo. What are your favorite serendipitous flavor finds due to just having a bunch of random stuff you need to use, end quote. All right, love this, Amy. It's a really good topic because it's something we live day in and day out here. We got all these veggies, sometimes seconds, that we can't sell. Now what? And I think in some ways my feelings about this are going to disappoint some people, especially as someone like myself with a large culinary background. But I also think I have a pretty solid approach to using basically any combination of vegetables that are flowing out of the garden. So maybe then you all can glean something useful here. So yes, your observation is spot on here. In an ideal world, we would have a recipe for every combination of foods coming out of the garden. But the reality is that no farmer or busy gardener has time for such things. And, the flow is always a little bit different. Often I have about 20 minutes to make a lunch as well. So, and maybe add another 15 minutes to that to eat it. Then I cap that off with a 20-minute nap required by the law of me surviving, and that's my entire break. So there are very rarely, lovely casseroles or fancy tarts coming out of our kitchen during the workday, or even in the evenings right now, as soccer practice and games keep us pretty much busy every day. But with those constraints, how do we still eat diversely and seasonally and deliciously? Well, and I may have discussed this before, but for us, it all centers around the starch. Now, if you are gluten-free or don't eat a lot of starch, it could be around the protein. But basically for us, every meal starts with the starch. So that could be rice or pasta or potatoes or couscous, which I recognize is a pasta, but it's kind of its own thing. Or it's pizza dough or sandwiches or, croutons or whatever. So once you have the starch, it's about making the sauce, finding the vegetables, and identifying the protein. So let's say right now, for instance, we roll with rice as the starch. What we would do is that we would gather maybe like onions and tomatoes or even some potatoes. I'm a big fan of double starches. But anyway, some potatoes or some herbs or whatever. Then we'd medium dice those potatoes and fry them, add the onions, mix in some summer squash or something, finish it with some tomatoes, and then top the rice with that mixture and probably some hot peppers or hot pepper sauce and garlic, of course. We might also add a little protein there, anything from mushrooms to meats, beans, lentils, all that stuff, and then top that off with herbs. We have even added an egg and finish the sauce in the broiler that way. Maybe we squeeze some fresh garlic right over top too. Okay, we almost always definitely do that. Or if it's a pasta, maybe we start with the onions and garlic on low heat, and then we move on to adding like a protein. Then the other veggies, like sweet potato greens right now is a good one, get mixed in, and then once the pasta's done, we just kind of fold all that together, and then we're good to go. And we can make that in the amount of time it takes to boil the water and cook the pasta, and then the sauce is ready to go. To me, even if the starches don't change all that much, every day still offers something new and exciting to play with. Arguably, my favorite season is coming up when we have sweet potatoes and tomatoes and peppers and cilantro kind of all at the same time. Maybe even some ginger thrown in there. Why not? We're talking about it. It's magical what all can be done with those specific ingredients together. In fact, stewed tomatoes and pan-fried sweet potatoes is one of my favorite flavor combos. There truly is no limit to how to use those things. And it's kind of funny, we never really talk about cooking on this show, and maybe part of that, I think, is that it would not be very interesting, I think, for our podcast only family who are just listening to this. But I obviously believe cooking and the special flavors of fresh garden produce is a big part of why a lot of us even bother doing all this work. So it's important that we find ways to make the most of the ingredients even when time is limited. I also believe you just start to develop seasonal recipes that make sense and for the vegetables that often are hitting all at the same time, even if they're not the most fancy thing in the world. Anyway, great question, and that is sort of all I got for you on this one. How about you all, though? Any fun discoveries or thoughts or easy ways to make the most of your garden harvests? Let us know. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get back to gingering. That's a word. Be right back. I think it's helping. Water? Who knew? I don't know who invented this stuff. It's great, though.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
All right, so let's get back to ginger and how to grow it and the spacing and all that good stuff. First, in terms of bed prep, ginger likes fertile, well-drained soil, like basically everything else. So make sure it's not having to fight compaction and that it's nice and loose, and that you incorporate, at very least, some really nice compost wherever you're going to plant it. What I will do is dig, a nice hole where I'm going to plant it, because we're just using the corners of our tunnels right now. Then I'll add compost in the bottom of that hole. I'll add the ginger on top of that, the ginger root that's already sprouted, and it usually down to about 6 to 8 inches deep. And then I'll cover that with the soil. Usually I actually have those corners encounters with wood chips, which it seems to be fine. I've never had any issues with the wood chips slowing down the ginger production. I think partially because it's just buried so deep. Anyway, if it's in the field, I might not go quite as deep because the deeper you bury them, the cooler the soil will be, and you want them to get into production pretty fast. Otherwise, they'll rot. Anyway, then I fill it, like I said, I fill it in generally around the plant. I try to keep some of the plant above the soil until it is grown tall enough that I can fill in the rest. Ideally, the plant at this point is like 6 to 8 inches tall anyway, so you're not burying it entirely anyway. If you have to, you can fill it in as the plant gets taller. Like I said, I'm not sure if that would affect the plant growth to fully bury it. Just go ahead and bury the whole thing. I kind of fear it would. I probably just wouldn't cover that growth point out of risk of slowing the ginger down or causing rot or whatever. The combo of spacing and rhizome size that yields the best results according to studies is about using a 1.4 ounce root spaced on a roughly 8 inch by 9 inch grid. So effectively 9 inches between plants with 8 inches between rows. So you will want roughly 15 to 25 pounds per 100 row feet, give or take, depending of course on how big you make your little chunks of the ginger. Then for watering, follow the same idea as the trays. A good soaking, like the tropics, followed by a nice dry period, also like the tropics. This process, like I said, usually starts in the trays in late February / early March for the tunnel, or late March / early April in the field, depending on where you are and if you're planting in a tunnel or in the field. Then they go into the ground or the tunnel about 4 to 6 weeks later. After that, they need regular cultivation to keep them weed-free and growing well. For us, when we were selling at the farmer's market, we liked to plant enough that we could start harvesting it in like August to beat the market, but still have enough to continue to harvest all the way through to October. Yield-wise, you'd want to at least get 8 pounds for every pound you plant of baby ginger. Now, baby ginger is really what most of us in the non-tropical environments are growing. We're not growing ginger all the way till it turns brown and has that like paper around it. It's basically the pretty red and peachy colored stuff and not the brown stuff. For the cured ginger, the stuff with the brown paper on it, you need a full 10-month frost-free season, which ain't happening here in Kentucky at least. Not really even in our tunnels. That said, the baby ginger will cure to some extent on the countertop. It just won't have the longevity of the cured ginger they grow in the tropics. Otherwise, when we harvest, we just pop it out, usually just by pulling, but a shovel may come in handy if the soil's not loose, depending on your soil type. If you're dealing with a lot of heavy clay, it may be harder than if you're dealing with sand. And then we trim some of the greens back, but we do kind of like to leave a little of that green on there only because it's really attractive and most people have never seen ginger like that. So it's a good conversation starter in the fall. Lastly, we will harvest everything before the coldest days really start. Like I said, it cannot get frosted. Then we can trim those greens and store it in a breathable container at room temperature for a few weeks. Sometimes the roots that sprouted the original ginger will be good to go. Like you can pull off that original seed root. Though I believe the yields are going to reduce a little bit that way and the risk of disease is potentially higher. So I may not be worth taking up production space with the reused roots. Maybe find a place to use those as ornamentals or something. Anyway, I think that's the bulk of what I may say about ginger production. What did I miss? Let me know. And otherwise, I think we're done here Tuesday, pretending to be Monday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Also appreciated is I got this book from John Collier, who I haven't read it yet. It looks very cool though. It's called Foraging Your Roots, a reference guide to over 270 wild edible species in eastern US. That's very cool. But I really like that John also does a seasonal foraging logbook. It's like got a calendar. That's very cool. So thank you, John. That's very neat. I appreciate you sending those along. Look forward to diving into that a little bit this winter. When we were living in the woods in Bug Tussle, we did a ton of foraging. I foraged basically every day. And I used to forage for chefs and stuff. So definitely up my alley. Where was I? Let's see. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat like this or like our beanies that Michael put a picture on the screen, or a copy of the Living Soil Handbook. Do that at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of September now, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Michael Miners, Ebola Lola Titus, the Rude Doula. That's a tongue twister and a Patreon member. That's fun. Pele? It's not Pele like the great soccer player. It could be if you deleted an L. I can't do that, though. I don't think that's in the rules. And Chad Hayes, shouts to all of you for signing up and kicking off this story this week. This story this week is about a hiker named Pat. That's good. I like that name, Pat. Pat is an experienced hiker, loves hiking, just goes multiple times a week. But one day, Pat has a really rough day at work and decides to go for a hike in the woods behind the city where Pat lives. It's nice, fall afternoon, leaves are changing and all that stuff. And usually Pat would let someone know where they were going hiking and all that stuff, and how long it would take. But this day, Pat was in a hurry. Pat was, fuming mad from the work thing and just heads out to blow off some steam. And usually Pat would be fine because, they've hiked this particular trail like 1,000 times. But there was just one hitch. What was that hitch? Well, that is for tomorrow on The Hitchhiker. That's not just spooky, but it's also a nice little play on words. Anyway, thanks for watching and/or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.